Welcome, everybody. Crawl into your interior cave and listen to The Hermit
and his wife, where we talk spirituality, parenting, Catholicism, inside and out. No,
you
you
listen
just say
to The Hermit
and his wife
and his wife.
and his wiffy.
Well,
back for round two. They came back for more.
Yeah.
Some of them did not.
Way to go.
They fled for the hills.
That's perseverance. That's really good. Fortitude. Okay.
Fortitude, it's a real virtue.
That's our crowd.
The fortitudious crowd.
People with fortitude. That's right.
What are we going to talk about today, Anthony? What do you think?
I think vocation.
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 Sounds very extremely important. But we had lots of questions from people, not only about how we discerned our vocation of being marriage to each other, but our vocation as both being attorneys, me not being a practicing attorney, you being the fabulous attorney that you are, fabulous, me working for Blessed Sheep, that kind of stuff. So maybe, I don't know, is it more interesting to start with our vocation to each other than boring lawyer stuff? I mean, fascinating lawyer stuff. What do you think?
I think that, I think we should start with, what is vocation? It comes from the Latin word vocare, which means to call. And I think that usually when people, within the Catholic world, when people are talking about vocation, usually they're thinking of vocation to the priesthood or religious life. So, which is fair, but that's sort of a
big V.
That's sort of a narrower understanding of the term vocation. V. Archbishop Vigano. V.
Then there's big V.
Right, big V, little V.
Variations in the size of V.
So I guess I don't know. I guess my thought is,
you discern actively both vocations.
That's right.
I landed on one, thankfully.
That's right. Well, I think probably the best approach here would be to understand vocation in the sense of what is God calling you to as a state in life. So it could be to the priesthood, it could be to the religious life, it could be to the married life, but it's a state in life. So I think
what does that mean? Define what do you mean by state in life?
State in life means it's not just a job like being a lawyer, but you're married. You've exchanged vows. You've made promises as a priest, or whatever. So I think that's really important because that gives you the context in which you're going to act and figure out, well, what's the next step? Because even if you're called to the priesthood, you're called to do something specific. But in order to get to those specific things, you have to be in that state. To throw out another phrase. Act follows being.
Act follows being. Who's that from?
That's another St. Thomas Aquinas quote. It might be Aristotle too. I don't know. We're going to chalk it up to St. Thomas Aquinas. But act follows being. So,
don't sue us.
Certain acts are proper to, depending on your state in life. Mm-hmm. So, within, you have to be married first in order to,
be married?
Properly,
marriage? Right. Here's an important question, though. So I've spoken to discernment houses. There's a wonderful discernment house for women here in the Archdiocese of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And before I went to go and give my talk with them and eat dinner and enjoy an evening, you had said to me, remember, what did you say? Something like vocation is specific. Vocation is specific. Okay. So when you say I feel like I'm called to marriage, that's okay, you're kind of getting in the ballpark, but you're only called to marriage to a specific person? How does that work? Yeah. And then what if you miss the mark?
Well, I guess How
do you grapple with that?
Yeah, one of the ways I think about it is you're not called to the abstract. You're not called to. You can have an interest, an attraction, or an inclination, to be a hermit. I still love. Who doesn't want to be alone with with God? To be alone with the alone.
I love to be alone with God, but I don't like being alone. That's why I'm the addendum here in this podcast.
Oh boy. No, but you're not called to the abstract. You're called to something specific. So, so some guys, for instance, when I was in the seminary, there were some guys who they decided that that God was not calling them to become priests, and in the way they went about it was they thought, oh, I'm called to the married life, and so. But you can't put the cart before the horse. I mean, that's a fair thing, but I think there's some important considerations there. One is, if you have an inclination to the priesthood or to the religious life, you should examine that, and you should answer that question yes or no first before So
binary. There's like a binary setup here.
Yeah. So if you're in the seminary or considering the religious life. While you're there, you're not trying to examine, well, am I really called to the married life? I mean,
you're not dating Jesus and another
yeah,
person,
yeah. You don't want to have a split, a split heart, so to speak. You want to be able to answer that question, and if the answer to that is no, then you can move on to the to the next step. Mm-hmm. So you have to answer that question first, but then getting into
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
How did you answer that question for you?
Yeah.
You had been at Notre Dame, you were running, you were there, and then you discerned to the diocesan seminary, which I feel like is so lucky because you stayed at Notre Dame. You definitely would have married some cute domer, let's be honest. And then you discerned, to the FSSP, and then you discerned, you had clear discernment. Sometimes people stay in one place and they don't discern to the next stage, but you were moving. There's a lot of movement in your path. How did you discern along the way?
Well, God works in concrete ways within our lives, and so people you meet, conversations you have, even books that you read, different experiences you have, and it's all sort of woven together, right? So, I had read Thomas Merton's 7-Story Mountain, which is his autobiography. It's a very interesting book. He was an atheist, and then eventually converted to Catholicism, and then ended up becoming a Trappist monk, and
kind of a wild ride.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But the way that he sort of, I'm not sort of putting a stamp of approval on everything Thomas Merton.
Yeah, he went pretty crazy at the end.
There's some questionable things there. So, but his autobiography is a really beautiful story, but the way he talked about prayer, it was incredible because trying to give yourself to God, trying to open yourself completely to God, and make that the focal point of your life. That was what really attracted me. And
grabbed you.
Yeah, but my spiritual director though, boy, I'm really talking a lot about myself.
That's the point.
Sorry,
that's the point.
This is not
we
meant to be
know.
narcissistic.
It's not, but I asked you.
I hope those some helpful points here. Okay.
That's what I'm asking you.
But my spiritual director, I was pretty young at the time, and 17, 18, and it wasn't really the right time to go to a religious community, and so the diocesan priesthood, I thought, well, that maybe that is for me. Yeah. So I sort of took that step in conjunction with consultation with my spiritual director. So, but it's a specific person. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to figure it out, in the silence of your heart, and you sort of have a sense of peace about something. If you're going to know when it's time to take a step, or when it's time to, or stay where you are. And you never want to make a decision when you're in a time of sort of disquietude and your soul is,
You feel like you had to like peace followed prayer to move from place to place, and then to discern. Yeah, because how old when we got married?
I was 30.
You were 30.
I was 30, and
you weren't really you were kind of thinking maybe you weren't even going to get married.
Yeah. So for anybody who's out there, I truly, I had looked at a number of different religious communities, and realized it wasn't for me, as much as I appreciate that way of life and incorporate certain aspects even now into my own life.
Hermit life.
I think that I had come to sort of accept. I had lots of nieces and nephews, and so I have sort of accepted the idea of I would be like crazy Uncle Anthony, like drive a red convertible, get them lots of gifts, you know, like single and just, you know, sort
That's
of.
where you're pretty sure you were going to be.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, so that was sort of what I had accepted, so to speak. But along the way, I did, you know, I met you, and
me.
You specifically, so in trying to discern, are we supposed to be married? You know, is that what God is calling us to? Is that going to be my path to sanctification? Because your state in life is intrinsically bound up with your sanctification, and whether or not, you know.
Break that down. So your journey to becoming a saint, right? When you say your sanctification, what do you mean by that?
So, you know, God wants you. He wants us. He wants everybody.
God wants us.
He wants us. It's an amazing thing. That's true. He's calling you to something very specific. He wants you to reach eternal beatitude and experience that. But everybody comes with, you know, kind of their own dispositions and different inclinations and things like that. So the experiences that you're going to have, you know, the virtues that you're going to develop, if, you know, that's going to be different, you know, for the married life is much different than, you know, being a hermit. There's many different challenges that come with it.
It is very different than being a hermit.
But you're not trying to discern in the abstract. So
that's an interesting way to put it.
It's
specific.
It's
you're
a specific person.
You're seeing if this is the person. You're wrestling with that. You're looking at your wounds, their wounds, your strengths, their weakness. Like you're evaluating how you're going to fit together and face life stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a hard evaluation process. I mean, it's not like for some people. I've heard from some people like, "Oh, I just knew the moment I met him." Some of these older couples in my life, they're like, "We just knew. We were high school sweethearts. We just knew." But I think especially for people, millennials and younger, there's just there are so many factors that go into discerning vocation that it's not necessarily a straight shot.
No, that's true. I had a sort of long and windy route, and everybody has their own story. I mean, you've got your own story, and
do I?
Do you?
Sorry, we're just having a lot of fun. The kids are downstairs. God knows what they're doing, but we're actually talking to each other. It's pretty great.
It is amazing. Yeah. Well,
it's pretty amazing. We're just waiting for someone to start crying.
Yeah.
It's fine. What about, so that's like, it's so helpful for people to hear a little bit of your background and your discernment, you know, through discerning the priesthood, discerning being a hermit, discerning marriage. It's just interesting. I always love hearing other people's stories because it helps inform my own. So thanks for sharing yours.
Yeah. Just to sort of underscore a few things. One is, like, if you think that you're called to the religious life, that's wonderful. But you have to sort of narrow the focus. I mean, you're looking for a specific community, you know.
Right.
You're not called to, you might think, oh, I love the, I don't know, the Benedictines or the Carthusians. But if you go to a particular community and they're crazy, or
they're crazy.
Well, then it's not going to work.
Well, then you know.
You might, maybe God's asking you to be there, but you're gonna get a sense of these things. So it's not, well, I'm meant to be a Benedictine and I'm just sort of like trying to find, that. It's like, well, I think I might be called to the Benedictines, but I have to find, the community you're called to. You think you might be called to the married life, you're not for sure. And you haven't met the one.
The love of your life.
Oh. So
that's really interesting.
So I think there can be a tendency for Catholics, especially, to sort of have this sense of, oh, I'm called to the married life, and they sort of have a checklist, of characteristics they're looking for. Oh, I want her to be like this. I want him to be like that. I want, and if they don't, no, you didn't hit, my top 10 requirements. No, it can't be you. Well, I mean, I don't think that's the way to go about it. I don't think you have to have a, like a preconceived list or whatever, and you're not, that's sort of, you have to appreciate, especially if you're thinking about married life, you're looking at a person. You know, it's not, they're not there to just like fit your list.
They're not there to fit your list. I like that.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Yay. You married me. I fit your list. You're not list. Thanks be to God. Poor kids.
I was looking for someone who was very quiet.
Very mild-mannered. No opinions.
Yeah, no opinions.
Not bossy.
Here you are.
Here I am. The Lord provided for you. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about what we do for work before we wrap up, because I think a lot of people's questions are about like, how do you figure out what you want to do for work? For me, that was going, I talked about this in our first video, being an English major, going on to law school, and trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do with this degree? And then when you intermesh family, it all just becomes more complex, because if you're blessed with children, you're figuring out like, well, whose career is going to be primary and whose career is going to be tertiary. So even secondary, not third, sorry. Who's going to be like first and third, whether that's a husband or the wife, whose hours come first, like if you're both working and the kids are sick at daycare, the kids are sick at school, like who's on the call list, like kind of figuring out that hierarchy goes, or, what's our student debt situation like? Is one of us going to stay home? And so many of the unknowns that come along with family life. So when we got married, we were hoping to have kids. And I think in the back of my mind, I always thought like, well, when we have kids someday, I want to be at home with them. And then 4 months into being married, we were pregnant with James, our oldest. And then it became really real. It no longer was like, oh, someday I'll stay home with a brood of small children, like, like the sound of music, like they'll all be gathered around me with instruments and we'll have this wonderful time. Like, no, I was throwing up constantly, incredibly sick. And the reality of, okay, there's a person inside me growing, and when this person comes out, somebody's going to be taking care of this person 24/7. What's this going to look like? So my transition from practicing law to staying home was much harder than I thought. I think for a lot of people who have to make that transition in their life, it is, because my identity was, I worked so hard in law school. I was managing under the law review. I had my law review note published. I clerked for a federal judge. Now the economy is really bad, but I do have these work opportunities that I'm taking. And this is who I am. I'm like an achiever and a doer. And being a mom with a tiny infant, everything that I did after James was born, and I switched to small practice part-time, working from home, everything I did was so invisible. Anthony would come home and I'd be wearing the same dirty clothes, and the baby would still be like needing to nurse and cry. None of the work of those, especially those early years of motherhood, none of that work is amazing and flashy and like so full of praise for the world. It's like rinse, repeat, which is so incredibly meaningful, but it's such a hidden meaning.
Yeah. And
that was really hard. That was a big adjustment for me. I remember one instance, dropping you off in downtown Minneapolis or bringing something to you at work and driving home down past all of these plazas where all these beautiful women with their lattes and their heels and their briefcases were walking into their buildings, and I was wearing an oversized shirt that had probably nursing stains on it, and the babies in the back of the car just crying. Like, I was just crying, like, oh my gosh, Anthony's going into an office to do important things in the law. No offense for the scarce quotes that I'm doing, and I'm going home to like have the baby need me constantly. It was a big shift. It was a big shift. And then even when we were pregnant with our second, I finally stopped practicing altogether because of how sick I was. It was a big shift. And to try to find meaning in what you're doing in your vocation, in what you're actually called to do, in the everyday, took many years of complaining and asking for more grace and struggling and trying to remember my identity isn't in what I do. Like even yours, like you're a partner in a law firm, way to go, you're in your early 40s, you're like rocking it, doing so great. But that's not your identity. It's what you do, and it's wonderful, and you're using your gifts and talents, and you're providing for our family, and that's great. But that to like to separate out those two in calling, in vocation, it was quite a trip for me. So then when Charlie was a couple months old, our third was maybe 4 or 5 months old. Someone had added me, my friend Nancy Vance, added me to this Facebook group that Jenny Gizar was running. It's like a mommy blogging group. I've been blogging since our oldest was a baby. And she said, hey, I think I'm going to start this thing where we do like devotions and like is anybody interested? It'd be like a daily email. I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like this is my skill set. This sounds like things I'm able to do, writing, editing, leading a team, managing stuff. Oh my gosh, please pick me. So the rest is history.
It just took off.
Well, it's been a blessing to be part of it.
Yeah.
We can talk, and we'll go like more in depth on like what we do in a different episode, but just to discern like what's in front of you, these opportunities will arise. You don't always have to stridently seek them out. If I had been like, I want to find a woman who's going to start a thing, and then I'm going to, it only could have happened organically.
No, that's a really great point that you're touching on there, is that there's different opportunities presented at different times. So within your vocation, like your primary vocation is, your state in life. So let's say you're married, right? Okay, you're married, great.
Right.
Then there's different stages in life. So what are you asked to do? What is God asking you to do within that vocation? So, even, as far as children goes, where are you going to live? And opportunities present themselves at different times. So, you had that opportunity years into, several years into marriage.
Yeah.
And it's not something that you could force. It wasn't something, you weren't even necessarily like banging down doors. It's sort of, one thing led to another. And that's, I think, one of the beautiful things about divine providence is that you never know when God is going to ask you to do something. And all these different experiences that you've had in life, or that, that you've had in life,
they like,
you can't, you
can't orchestrate it.
You can't orchestrate it. You were help put together like a poetry journal, right? When you were in college. So, that helped you when you were, working on law review, and then that helped, lead the team of Blessed Is She, for the writer. So all these different things sort of culminate, and then you're ready. So even if something seems like it's a wasted experience,
nothing's wasted though.
It's not. I think it was Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower, the president. He was assigned to France, and he like doing maps and different things, and it was sort of he thought, this is kind of a waste of time. And
but was it?
But it wasn't, because it turned out he got to know the land so well, and
right.
maybe this is complete. Maybe I even had the wrong person. I don't know.
We'll pretend it's Eisenhower. We're just gonna credit Eisenhower here.
But you never know, and fast forward. So it's like in your tool belt. But God asks different things at different times, and it's not stagnant. That's the beautiful thing, is just because you're doing something now doesn't mean you're going to do that for the rest of your life. Within your vocation. So like maybe you're a lawyer for a while, and then you segue to something else, or maybe you add on new things. Maybe I don't know. It just depends, and you kind of get a sense of that when when God is presenting an opportunity for you. You don't have to say yes to everything, but you have to you want to prayerfully consider it. So.
But I think we can view things as like a failure. Like, well, I failed all the way until I got to this point. But you wouldn't have gotten to that point if you hadn't had all those experiences. Whether it's dumb jobs or dumb relationships, or times where you made so many mistakes, you fell into your habits of sin, like all of those things. Like God can use all of that. He does use all of that to help us continue to grow and blossom in our big V vocation, big V, and our little V. To not be anxious about, I'm not where I wanted to be at this age. I thought at this age I'd be in this spot, I'd be married, I'd be successful, quote unquote, whatever that means. To remember that, do what you're doing well and continue to watch and look for opportunities, because then they'll come. Like if you're watching for things, then you'll see them when they arise. But good stuff will happen. Good stuff is coming. Even in these crazy times, God will make good even out of this.
Yeah, it's God's timetable.
God's time not around. All right, what's your last bit of advice? Last wrap up on vocation.
I think the most important thing is to say yes to God.
Ooh, I love that.
Is to be open. Mm-hmm. Is to be open to Him. God wants you. He doesn't want He doesn't want like a set of accomplishments and all these different things. He wants you. And if you consistently every day, if you're if your disposition is you're trying to offer yourself to God, you will be who you're supposed to be. You're going to do what God wants you to do, and that's the most important thing. So like when you're considering a vocation, think of it through the lens of how can I best serve God? What's my way to sanctification? And sometimes it can seem a little, it can seem a little crazy, but you'll get a sense of it. So just open yourself to God and give yourself to God every day.
And just ask for lots of help from friends, family, God, people on the internet. All right, that's it. We'll see you next time.